The first blast shattered the morning. Neighbors thought it was an accident, a gas line maybe, or a car crash down the block. But it wasn't. It was the front door of the Collins family ripped off its hinges by a SWAT ram. Splinters flying across. The porch like shrapnel. Inside, breakfast plates were still warm. 16-year-old Nia Collins sat frozen at the kitchen table, her spoon halfway to her mouth when masked men in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised. Her father, Andre, didn't even have time to stand before he was slammed to the floor. Her mother, Monica, tried to shield her daughter, only to feel cold plastic zip ties biting into her wrists. The officers shouted as though they had cornered violent fugitives. "Hands where I can see them. Don't move." Every second was chaos. And yet, behind the shouting, there was something more disturbing. The calm precision of men who believed they were in the right house, but they weren't. The warrant they carried had a different address, a one-lit difference, 17 instead of 17B. In the cold logic of the raid, that detail vanished. All the officers saw was a black family in a predominantly white neighborhood. And for them, that was enough to kick down the door. Cameras from nearby porches caught the aftermath. Andre pinned under 3 men, blood streaking across the carpet. Monica screaming that she was an attorney. Nia with a rifle muzzle and chest from her forehead. The footage raced across social media within minutes, fueling outrage. Hackett Wronghauser raid, #Justice for Collins. To the world outside, it looked like another tragic mistake. Another line in a long history of wrong doors and accidental raids. That somehow always fell on black families. But inside the Collins home, something far darker was unfolding. Because Monica wasn't just a lawyer, she was a civil rights attorney who had been working quietly with the Department of Justice, compiling evidence against local SWAT teams accused of targeting minorities. She knew the playbook. Raids and flimsy. Warrants, planted evidence, lies written into reports. And now in her own kitchen, she watched it happen in real time. As one officer tore through the pantry, she heard the words that changed everything. "Bag it. Make it stick." Seconds later, a Ziploc bag of protein powder was labeled as narcotics. Was this incompetence or was this intentional? The Collins family didn't just suffer the wrong door. They had stumbled into something much bigger. A conspiracy meant to bury investigations, intimidate witnesses, and protect a department already under scrutiny. What the SWAT unit didn't know, not yet, was that the woman zipped on the floor was the one person capable of bringing their entire system down. And when the dust settled, it wouldn't be the Collins family on trial. It would be the men who kicked in their door. The Collins family was not what the SWAT team expected. Andre Collins wasn't a drug dealer hiding from the law. He was a 45-year-old Army veteran who had served 2 tours overseas before returning home to raise his daughter in a quiet Texas neighborhood. He worked as an engineer, disciplined and precise, the kind of man who double-locked his doors at night and kept a small flag planted in the front yard. His wife Monica was no stranger to injustice either. At 42, she had built her career as a civil rights attorney, often representing families who claimed they were victims of racial profiling or wrongful arrest. For her, the fight against systemic police misconduct wasn't theory. It was her daily work. And their daughter, Nia, was 16, a student with a scholarship dream and a smile that lit up every classroom. To the outside world, they were the picture of a black American family doing everything right. A veteran father, an attorney mother, a daughter on the path to college. Yet none of that mattered when armored boots crossed their threshold. To the men in uniform, the Collins family wasn't seen as neighbors. They were targets. The raid had been justified on paper bio warrants signed less than 24 hours earlier. According to the affidavit, a confidential informant claimed that narcotics were being trafficked out of 17A. The problem was obvious. The Collins residence was 17B. That single letter became the difference between an ordinary morning and a nightmare that would unravel an entire department. Still, as the SWAT sergeant barked orders and his men tore through drawers, nobody admitted the mistake. Andre lay restrained on the living room floor, his face pressed against the carpet he had vacuumed the night before. He could hear the officers moving through his home, Bootsteps echoing on hardwood, the scrape of cabinets pulled open. Every sound was an insult to the years he had spent defending the country, only to be treated like an enemy in his own house. When he tried to speak, a rifle but nudged his ribs. "Stay down," the officer hissed. Monica, forced to her knees with her hands bound, kept her eyes on her daughter. Nia trembled, tears streaking her cheeks, her cereal now congealed on the floor beside her. Monica's instincts as a mother screamed louder than her training as an attorney. She wanted to protect her child from the barrels off guns aimed too close to her face. Yet, she also knew something chilling. Everything unfolding in that room looked exactly like the affidavit she had been collecting for the Department of Justice. She had seen the pattern, warrants issued on flimsy tips, SWAT raids escalating into chaos, evidence appearing out of nowhere. Now she was living it. The sergeant's voice cut through her thoughts. "Clear the upstairs. Bag anything suspicious." His men moved with mechanical precision. It was theater. Monica realized a performance of authority. Then she heard the words that made her blood run cold. "Bag it. Make it stick." An officer emerged from the pantry holding a small Ziploc bag filled with white powder. Nia gasped. It wasn't cocaine. It wasn't meth. It was her protein supplement from track practice bought at a local store. Monica's legal brain instantly calculated the danger. If that bag went tinto, the official report, the Collins family could be buried under fabricated charges before they even stepped into a courtroom. Andre lifted his head, his voice raw. "That's food, not drugs." "Don't you dare!" The nearest officer shoved him back down, but another pair of eyes in the room told a different story. One of the Aunger SWAT members, barely out of his 20s, shifted. Uncomfortably, his bodycam was still recording, the red light blinking. His gaze lingered on the bag of powder, then flicked to Monica as though silently acknowledging he knew the truth. Outside, neighbors whispered from behind fences and porches. Some filmed, others simply watched in stunned silence. The Collins family had always kept to themselves, polite nods at block parties, quiet evenings on the porch. Now their home was swarming, with armed men as if they were cartel bosses. For the community, it was a reminder of the fragile line between safety and fear. For Monica, it was evidence. Every second burned into her memory. She repeated it like a litany. The wrong address, the planted evidence, the guns aimed at her child. These weren't mistakes. They were decisions. She knew how quickly police reports could twist facts, how easily words like resisting or disorderly conduct could erase the truth. She also knew her casework at .doj was close to breaking wide open. Maybe that wasn't a coincidence. When the officers dragged Andre upright to sit against the wall, his eyes met Monica's. No words passed between them, but the message was clear. Survive now, fight later. He had lived through combat zones where survival was the first rule. This was no different. The raid lasted less than 40 minutes, but for the Collins family, it stretched like an eternity. By the time the SWAT team regrouped in the yard, the front door was destroyed, cabinets ripped from hinges, and a living room that looked more like a battlefield than a family home. They left behind shattered glass, bruised wrists, and an unspoken threat. Stay quiet or it gets worse. Yet silence was never an option for Monica Collins. That night, after the police vehicles cleared and neighbors hesitantly returned indoors, she sat at the dining table surrounded by debris. Andre nursed a split lip. Nia clutched her phone, scrolling through social media where the hashtag #WrongHouseRaid was climbing fast. The video clips from neighbors showed everything. The forced entry, the shouting, the fear, etched across a teenager's face. But Monica knew viral outrage was only the beginning. If the department wanted to bury this raid, they could. Reports could be falsified. Evidence could vanish. The city could call it regrettable but lawful unless she acted first. In the quiet of her battered home, Monica opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thin black folder. Inside were affidavit, complaints, and case files she had been gathering for months. Families across Texas who claimed they had been terrorized by the same SWAT culture. Her investigation wasn't ready for court. It wasn't even supposed to be public yet, but the raid had changed everything. Now she had personal proof. She looked at her husband and daughter at the wreckage of their living room, at the broken front door that gaped open like a wound. Then she whispered words that Andre had never heard from her lips before. This was no mistake. And in that moment, the Collins family stopped being victims. They became witnesses in a case that would shake their city and maybe the nation. The raid left scars deep in the broken glass and splintered wood. In the hours that followed, the Collins home became both a crime scene and a rallying point. Cars slowed outside to stare at the wreckage. Reporters hovered near the end of the block, sensing a story but lacking the facts. And inside, the family pieced together fragments of a nightmare that refused to make sense. Andre replayed every moment in his mind like a soldier reviewing battlefield footage. The way the sergeant had barked orders without checking the address. Thessalon's when he and Monica protested, they were the wrong family. The bag of protein powder deliberately mislabeled as contraband. These weren't accidents of adrenaline. They were choices, calculated and cold. Monica, still bruised from the plastic cuffs, scanned her legal files with a sharper eye than ever. Case after case showed the same signature. Forced entry on bad intelligence. Aggressive tactics justified after the fact. Black families portrayed as uncooperative or resisting. Now the pattern wasn't abstract. It had a face. Hers that night. She called 2 colleagues at the Department of Justice. Her voice was steady, though her body still trembled from the shock. She reported every detail she could remember, every word she had overheard, every action that crossed the line. On the other end of the line, the official listened in silence before replying, "Document everything. Don't ask them your local reports. We'll survive intact. We'll move fast, but you need to hold your ground." It was both reassurance and warning. Meanwhile, Naya scrolled through her phone, watching that clip spread faster than wildfire. Neighbor shaky videos now had thousands of views, then tens of thousands. One clip showing her mother shouting, "This is the wrong house," while rifles loomed overhead, hit a 100,000 views before midnight. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag racist cop raid, civil rights abuse, wrong house raid. Each share pulled the story out of their neighborhood and into the bloodstream of the internet, but with visibility came risk. By dawn, trolls flooded their accounts, accusing family of exaggerating, of hiding something. Anonymous messages slipped into their inboxes. "Stop playing the victim. You think DOJ will protect you? Think again." Andre knew intimidation when he saw it. He had spent years in combat zones where threats were meant to wear you down before the real strike came. These weren't random trolls. They were signals. Someone inside the system wanted them quiet. The following day, 2 detectives from Internal Affairs arrived unannounced. Their smiles were rehearsed, their clipboards neat, but their questions were leading. Did the family have relatives with criminal records? Had anyone in the household ever been arrested? Was it possible the suspect they were chasing had used the Collins address by mistake? Monica answered each question with the precision of a trial attorney, refusing to yield an inch. When the detectives left, Andre turned to her. "They weren't here to investigate. They were here to build Astri against us." She nodded. They both knew the playbook. Shift blame onto the victims, rewrite the narrative before the truth could harden. But the Collins family had something most others didn't. Single quote. Andre retrieved the hard drive from the hidden security system he had installed years earlier. Military cameras, almost invisible, had recorded the raid from 3 angles. The footage showed everything. The door being rammed, Monica and Nia forced to the ground, the sergeant giving the order to make it stick. And it showed the officer holding the bag of protein powder, his hesitation visible, his body language screaming discomfort. The question was what to do with it. If he handed it directly to local authorities, it could disappear. If they waited for the DOJ, the delay might allow the department to bury them under counterclaims. But if they leaked it publicly, they risked retaliation before the investigation could fully take shape. While Monica debated strategy, Andrew noticed something strange. The younger officer from the raid, The one whose eyes had met Monica's in silent recognition appeared in the footage more than once. In each clip, he seemed at odds with his team, his movement says it. And at the end of one sequence, when he turned toward the hallway camera, Andre swore the man's gaze lingered, almost intentional, as if he knew he was being recorded. Was Hezek nailing them or warning them? The ambiguity gnawed at Monica. As an attorney, she trusted evidence, not instincts. Yet something about that officer's expression suggested cracks inside the SWAT team itself. If one of them had doubts, maybe he held the key to unraveling the rest. The following weekend, the Collins family attended a community meeting at a local church. Word of the raid had galvanized neighbors, activists, even reporters from outside the state. In the crowd at Hull, voices rose with anger and fear. Families recounted their own brushes with aggressive policing. Traffic stops that escalated without reason. Homes searched on vague warrants. Arrests dismissed quietly months later. The Collins case wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern that had festered in silence until now, when Monica stood to speak, the room hushed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She described the raid in stark detail. The wrong address, the guns, the planted evidence. She ended with words that struck like a hammer. This wasn't a mistake, it was misconduct. And misconduct is never an accident. Applause erupted, echoing against the stained glass windows. First time since the raid, the Collins family felt the tide shifting. They weren't alone, but the victory was short-lived. Later that night, as they returned home, Andre spotted a car idling across Theth Street with its headlights off. It stayed there for nearly an hour. When he finally approached, the engine roared and the car sped away. On the front porch, a folded piece of paper waited under a stone. In block letters it read, "Drop it or pay the price." The message was clear. Silence or survival, yet the Collins family had already made their choice. Inside, Monica opened her laptop and began drafting a motion that would tie their raid directly to the DOJ's ongoing investigation into police misconduct. Andre encrypted the camera footage and prepared it for multiple backups. Nia, despite her fear, uploaded clips to a secure drive shared with a journalist she trusted. The family was no longer simply reacting. They were fighting back. Still, one question lingered in Monica's mind, haunting her even as she worked into the early hours. If this raid was meant to intimidate her, why risk exposing the department so blatantly? Why strike the very attorney already investigating them? Unless the raid wasn't a blunder at all, unless it was bait. And if it was bait, then who exactly were they trying to lure out? The Collins family had crossed a line without realizing it. They weren't just victims anymore. They were witnesses holding proof that could burn an entire department to the ground, and the department knew it. The threats, the car idling outside, the note left on their porch, they weren't accidents, they were pressure tactics. What the police didn't understand was that Andre and Monica had both lived their lives inside pressure, one as a soldier, one as an attorney. They knew how to endure. What mattered now was how to strike back. Andre began his morning like he was preparing for combat. He checked the locks twice, scanned the perimeter, and reviewed the hidden footage again. Each replay fueled his resolve. The audio captured the sergeant's order, "Bag it. Make it stick." The video showed the planted evidence. For Andre, it was clear this wasn't sloppy policing. It was intentional. Monica agreed, but her eyes were on something bigger. If this footage stays only in our hands, they can discredit us, she told him. We need corroboration, independent eyes. That's when the under officer returned. He didn't arrive in uniform. He came in a plain hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low, and parked 2 streets over before walking to their door. Andre spotted him on the camera feed and tensed, but Monica held him back. Wait, let's hear him. The officer identified himself as Daniel Ward, a recent transfer into the SWAT unit. His voice shook as he spoke. I can't keep my mouth shut anymore. What they did to you, it wasn't an error. They were ordered to do it. The words dropped like lead, ordered. Daniel explained what he had seen and heard. A closed-door meeting where superiors discussed targeting Monica Collins by name. Shows considered a problem. A lawyer feeding the DOJ too much ammunition. Therad wasn't about catching a suspect, it was about intimidation. Destroy her credibility. Maybe plant enough evidence to tie her family to drugs and ruin her casework before it reached federal court. They wanted you silenced, Daniel admitted. And if I hadn't pulled my body cam feed early, it would already be erased. Monica stared at him, studying every flicker of expression. Was he genuine or another layer of deception? Andre didn't trust. Easily, but something in the young officer's unease felt real. Daniel slid a small flash drive across the table. This is my copy. If they find out, I'm done. Maybe worse. But people need to see it. For Monica, the decision crystallized with the body cam footage, their security tapes, and neighbors' live streams. The raid could no longer be framed as a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act of police misconduct. But she also knew releasing the files would trigger a storm, one they might not survive intact. The storm came faster than expected. 2 days later, while Andre was at their hardware store repairing their door, an unmarked SUV slowed outside the Collins residence. Monica watched from the kitchen window as 2 men in suits stepped out. They weren't reporters and they weren't neighbors. Their posture screamed law enforcement, but their badges never left their pockets. They knocked once hard. When Monica didn't answer, they circled the house, peering through windows. Nia clutched her mother's arm, whispering, "Are they here to arrest us?" Monica stayed calm, forcing her breathing steady. She called Andre, who told her to stay put, lock every entry, and record everything. Minutes later, the SUV pulled away, but the message was clear. They were being watched. That night, Monica's phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was low, deliberate. "Mrs. Collins, drop the footage. You're playing with fire. If you push this, the DOJ won't save you. We know how to make people disappear without headlines." The line went dead before she could respond. Andre returned from the garage carrying an old duffel bag, the kind he hadn't touched since his army days. Inside was a satellite phone, a burner laptop, and encrypted drives. "If they want war," he said quietly, "we'll give them one on our terms." But Monica knew brute force wasn't their path. Theirs was law, exposure, and timing. She reached out to a trusted journalist she had worked with on previous civil rights cases. The plan was simple: deliver the footage in person, control the narrative before the department could spin it. Yet nothing about the delivery went smoothly. As Andre drove across town with the encrypted drive hidden under the seat, he noticed headlights trailing them, shifting lanes whenever he did. His combat instincts roared awake. He cut through side streets, doubled back, tested the tail. The car stayed close. At a red light, he glanced in the mirror and saw 2 men inside. One speaking into a radio. Andre's pulse hammered, but he stayed composed. "We're not leading them to the journalist," he told Monica. He turned it sharply into a crowded grocery lot, parked and pulled Nia close. "Get inside, act normal." They walked into the fluorescent aisles as if shopping, blending into the crowd. The tail car idled outside, waiting. For the first time, Andre realized just how far the department would go to protect itself. When they finally slipped out through a back exit and took a cab, Monica clutched the drive to her chest. The footage was more than evidence now, it was survival. She knew one mistake, one misstep, and their entire family could vanish behind bars. Or worse, back at home, Daniel Ward texted them a warning. "They know you have the files. Don't trust anyone inside the department, not even Ia. They're all compromised." The Collins family sat insolent around their dining table, the house still, scarred from the raid, the air heavy with dread. Andre broke it with a soldier's bluntness. "We're out of time. Either we go public or they bury us first." Monica looked at her daughter, the fear that had aged her beyond 16 years in just 1 week. Then she looked at Andre. Her voice was steady, almost cold. "We go public tonight." The decisión to go public was irreversible. Once the footage left their hands, there will be no undoing it, no quiet settlement, no second chances. Monica knew this better than anyone. In court, evidence is power. But on the street, evidence is provocation. Whoever wanted them silenced would not sit idle. The Collins family moved quickly. That night, Monica drove to a discreet meeting point in downtown Austin. The journalist she trusted, Rachel Price, waited in a dim cafe lit by flickering neon. Rachel was known for exposing corruption in law enforcement, her reporting often sparking national debate. She listened intently as Monica slid the encrypted drive across the table. Rachel's brow furrowed as she scrolled through clips. The door bang smashed in, Andre pinned to the floor. Nia terrified and the sergeant's voice clear, undeniable, ordering the powder to be bagged as evidence. "This isn't sloppy work," Rachel whispered. "This is police misconduct on a scale that screams cover up. If this airs, the entire city will ignite." Monica's reply was steady, then let it ignite. Rachel promised a story within 48 hours. But in a city where whispers traveled faster than truth, word of Thelic reached the department before Rachel even left the cafe. By morning, the Collins home was swarmadagon, not by SWAT but by media trucks. Reporters crowded the street, microphones raised, neighbors watching from lawns. Andre stood guard at the doorway, refusing to let cameras inside. The narrative had shifted. Headlines read, "Racist cop raid," "Black family claims evidence planted." Cable panels debated whether the footage was authentic. Online, the hashtags balloned. "Into a storm, wrong house raid #police brutality." #justice for Collins. Inside the department, panic set in. Officers whispered about suspensions, indictments, careers ending overnight. But higher up, the panic turned to aggression. Someone leaked a fabricated draft accusing Andre of past criminal ties, claiming Monica had obstructed officers during the raid. The smear campaign was fast, surgical, designed to flip public perception before Rachel's story could air. Andre read the report online, his hands trembling with rage. "They're turning me into the suspect. They're rewriting everything." Monica gripped his arm. "That means we hit a nerve. It means they're afraid." The tension snapped 2 nights later. Rachel called Monica from a secure line. "The footage is real. I verified it with 3 independent experts. But someone is trying to block the broadcast. My station just got a legal threat claiming national security. Monica. They're trying to classify this as federal intelligence material. It made no sense until it did." Daniel Ward appeared at their doorstep again, sweat beading his forehead. "They're escalating," he warned. "This isn't just about your raid. There are dozens more. Entire neighborhoods flag as probable risk zones. They've been using confidential funds to run illegal operations, writing fake warrants, planting evidence to justify raids and the DOJ investigation you were part of. It's closer than you realize. That's why they came for you. They needed to destroy you before you could." Connect the dots, Monica's breath caught. The raid wasn't just intimidation, it was containment. They weren't an isolated target. They were a domino in a chain of corruption stretching across the state. Rachel's story went live the next morning. Despite threats, the footage aired in prime time, uncut and raw. Viewers watched the Collins family's door explode. Andre slammed down, Nia terrified, Monica screaming and the powder planted. The nation recoiled. Anchor desks, Acris networks replayed the clip, dissecting every frame. The question was no longer did police make a mistake. It was how many more raids were like this and who ordered them. Public outrage erupted. Protesters filled downtown Austin chanting against police brutality, demanding accountability. Civil rights attorneys filed motions en masse, citing the Collins case as proof of systemic abuse. The mayor called for an emergency review. The governor issued a cautious statement urging calm and trust in due process, but calm was impossible inside. The department, factions splintered. Some officers demanded the sergeant's resignation. Others circled wagons, insisting the footage was doctored. The sergeant himself held a press conference, glaring at cameras. Ash declared, "We followed protocol. This family's claims are a coordinated attack on law enforcement." His words rang hollow against the images playing on split screens behind him. Yet the climax of the storm came not on television, but at the Collins home. As protests raged outside. City Hall, an unmarked car screeched to a halt near their driveway. Two masked men leaped out, sprinting toward the house with bats in hand. Andre reacted instinctively, pushing his daughter behind him. But before the men could strike, neighbors swarmed from porches, cameras raised, shouting. The attackers froze, realized they were surrounded by dozens of lenses, and bolted back into the car. The crowd chased them down Thess Street, filming every step. The video uploaded instantly. Headlines screamed, "Attack on Collins family after SWAT footage leak." Any doubt about intimidation evaporated. This wasn't random, it was orchestrated. That night, Monica sat in her living room, surrounded by shattered trust and national headlines. Andre cleaned blood from his knuckles where he had swung at one of the attackers. Nia sat silently, scrolling through an endless feed of comments, some supportive, some venomous. The family was both symbol and target. Then came the twist within the climax. Daniel Ward returned one final time, pale, shaking. He confessed that the sergeant wasn't acting alone. The raid had been authorized by a network of senior officials covering up years of misconduct. They needed leverage against DOJ, he whispered. Raiding you wasn't a mistake, it was bait. They wanted to see who you'd run to, who you'd share thief files with, and now they know. Monica stared at him, her mind racing. The conspiracy was larger than she imagined. Her family wasn't just in danger because of what they'd suffered, but because of what they might expose next. For the first time, fear cracked her voice. Then who exactly are we up against? Daniel's reply was barely audible. Everyone. Daniel's revelation landed like a detonation inside the Collins living room. If the raid was bait, then the family wasn't just collateral damage. They were the trap itself. Monica gripped the edge of the table, her mind calculating faster than fear. The Department of Justice had files from her. Yes, but if senior officials were involved in authorizing raids, the DOJ itself might not be safe. Someone in Washington had their hands on the strings. Andre's instinct sharpened to a point. We can't wait for them to come again, he said. We need to flip the game. His voice carried the authority of someone who had once commanded men under fire. Monica nodded, though her strategy leaned different. If they wanted to track who we'd turn to, then we show them. We give them something they can't bury. The plan was dangerous. Deliver the full cache of evidence not just to DOJ, but simultaneously to the FBI Civil Rights Division and trusted media outlets nationwide. A multi-pronged adrelius would make eraser impossible, but it meant moving fast before the department tightened its grip. That night, Monica and Andre drove in separate cars, splitting the drives. Andre's route took him towards San Antonio, where an FBI field office had one contact. Daniel swore was clean. Monica headed north. Her drive intended for Rachel's newsroom. Nia stayed behind with family friends, terrified but resolute. Bring it down, she whispered to her prince before they left. Andre's trip unfolded like a shadow game. He switched highways twice, used decoys, and finally pulled into the FBI parking lot. Inside, the agent he met wasn't a stranger. It was an old comrade from his army days, now wearing the Bureau's badge. Trust wasn't automatic, but the handshake was firm. The recognition undeniable. Andre placed the encrypted drive on the desk. This isn't just about us, it's a pattern. Dozens of raids, evidence planted, and someone up top signed off. The agent's eyes narrowed as he scanned the first files. If this is real, it's not just misconduct. It's organized crime in uniform. He promised to escalate, but Andre caught the hesitation. The Bureau wasn't immune to politics. Even inside the FBI, factions could strangle a case before it breathed. Meanwhile, Monica's journey north twisted darker. Halfway across town, she spotted flashing lights in her mirror. A cruiser pulled behind, sirens slicing the night. Her pulse spiked. Was this coincidence? Or interception? She eased to the shoulder, rehearsing her rights in her head. The officer approached, flashlight slicing through her window. His face was unfamiliar, his badge number blurred by the glare, license and registration. His tone carried none of the politeness of routine stops. Monica handed over her papers calmly. Where are you headed, ma'am? The officer pressed. Sheensward with silence, forcing the law to hold. His eyes flicked to the passenger seat where her bag lay zipped, before he could demand it. Headlights appeared from the opposite lane, a black SUV slowed, its door opening. The officer stiffened, then muttered something into his radio before handing back her license. "Drive safe," he said sharply, retreating to his cruiser. Seconds later, both vehicles peeled away in opposite directions, leaving Monica shaken but intact. She drove the rest off the way, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles blanched. At the newsroom, Rachel met her at the door. They locked the drive in a secure server and began uploading files under heavy encryption. The footage on-seared could topple more than just a police unit. It could expose systemic rot tied to federal funding streams, civil asset forfeit abuse, and fraudulent reports designed to siphon millions. "This isn't just racist cops terrorizing families," Rachel said. "This is profit machine, a back in Austin, pressure-mounted." Protest crowds doubled, centupled, flooding the courthouse steps. Signs bore the Collins name beside slogans. "Stop police brutality," "Racist SWAT raids," "Justice now." The mayor demanded resignations. The police union countered with denials. Tension reached a fever pitch, and then the leak at Rachel's story went national. Networks across America replayed thief footage, anchor men speaking with outrage. The sergeant's words, "Make it stick," blared through living rooms coast to coast. Social media erupted with millions of shares under hashtags like #PlantedEvidence. Vibe investigation, #Justice for Collins. The Collins family was no longer just a local headline. They were a national flashpoint. But victory carried its own backlash. Within hours of the broadcast, the Collins home was vandalized, window shattered under bricks, their garage sprayed with slurs. Andre stood in Thuricage, jaw set, while Monica documented every inch. "They want us rattled," she said. "But every stone they throw is more proof of retaliation." The true reversal arrived 2 days later. Daniel Ward, the young officer, vanished. His phone went dark, his apartment was found ransacked, files missing, bodycam drives gone. The department claimed he had fled to avoid investigation. Monica didn't buy it. She knew disappearance when she saw it. Daniel had been silenced, whether by force or by fear. Then came the call from Washington. A senior DOJ official requested Monica's immediate presence for a closed session. Andre insisted on accompanying her. His military instincts screaming trap. They arrived in a sterile federal building where men in suits ushered them into a conference room. On the table sat stacks of files, some bearing her own notes, others she had never seen. The official leaned forward. "Mrs. Collins, you've unleashed something far larger than your case. We now have evidence that dozens of raids were falsified across Texas and beyond. But the people you're up against aren't just local cops. They have federal shields, contracts, and political cover. You've put a spotlight on them, but you've also painted a target on yourself." The word chilled her more than threats on her porch. This wasn't reassurance. It was warning. The implication was clear: don't proceed, and she might bring down giants or be crushed beneath them. Andres Ripley was blunt. "Then you'd better decide which side you're on." The Collins family left the federal building with no sense of victory. If anything, the air felt heavier, the shadows longer. DOJ officials' warning echoed in Monica's ears. Evidence of systemic abuse was in their hands, but so was the knowledge that powerful figures would fight to the last breath to bury it. She looked at Andre as they walked into the parking lot. "They're not telling us everything," she said. He nodded. "Which means we keep moving as if every step is being watched." Back at their house, the street was lined with protesters, cameras, and police cruisers. Supporters chanted their names, accusing the Collins family of slandering good cops. The atmosphere crackled like a live wire. When Andres stepped onto the porch, chants and jeers collided in the same breath. To him, it felt less like support and more like tinder waiting for a spark. That spark arrived in the form of a press leak. A local station released excerpts from a sealed police file claiming Andre hadn't been investigated for weapons trafficking during his Army years. It was fiction, an old clerical error already cleared, but broadcast now as if it were truth. Headline screamed, Thubil looks into Colin's family patriarch. Andre clenched his fists as Monica scrolled through the smear. They're trying to rewrite you, she whispered. Make you the criminal so they can erase the crime. But the smear backfired. Veterans groups rallied online defending Andre's service record. Fellow soldiers testified that his career had been spotless, his loyalty unquestioned. Hashtags like #veterans for Collins trended, alongside calls for accountability. What the department hoped would fracture public trust instead drew more eyes. To the Collins case then came another blow. Rachel, the journalist, called in a panic. My newsroom servers were hacked, files deleted, backup drives wiped. Whoever it is, they're inside government systems. This isn't just cops protecting themselves. It's a coordinated shield. Monica's stomach dropped. The evidence she delivered was now exposed to sabotage. Every copy had to be redundant, encrypted, scattered like seeds. Andre pulled out his burner laptop and began sending fragments of video and documents to multiple secure clouds, activists and civil rights attorneys across the country. If they want to shut us down, he said, they'll have toslance the whole nation. The escalation triggered something unexpected. A quiet call arrived from an FBI agent in D.C., separate from Andre's earlier contact. The agent refused to give a name, but his words were urgent. We've traced financial flows tied to your raid. Kickbacks from seized assets, federal funds diverted into private accounts. This isn't only about intimidation, it's about profit, and someone very high up is signing off. You're not just in a fight with Austin PD, you're staring at a network that spans states. Monica felt ground shift again. Every time she thought she understood the scope, it widened. What started as a SWAT raid on Throng House was mutating into a federal conspiracy involving asset forfeit fraud, racist policing patterns, and millions siphoned under the guise of drug enforcement. The pressure closed in physically a swell. One evening, as Andre locked up, gunshots cracked in the distance. Bullets shattered the mailbox, sending sparks across the driveway. Protesters scattered, screams filling the night. Andre shielded Nia while Monica called 911 only to hear the dispatchers. Voice cool and dismissive. Units are busy with protests downtown. We'll send someone when available. No one came. Hours passed. The family cleaned up the shards themselves, but even fear had its limits. That same footage caught on a neighbor's door camera ricocheted online. By morning, the image of bullet holes in the Collins mailbox became another rallying cry. They survived the raid. Now they survived the retaliation. National pressure finally forced a break. The FBI's Civil Rights Division announced a joint task force with DOJ to investigate not only the raid, but the broader allegations of planted evidence and wrongful arrests. On paper, it was victory. In reality, the Collins family became pawns in a power struggle between federal agencies. One faction pushed for exposure. Another lobbied for silence, arguing public trust in law enforcement was too fragile to withstand the truth. The first raid had been violent. The second was quieter. Legal motions, subpoenas, gag orders. Monica received annotations forbidding her from speaking further to protect the integrity of the investigation. She laughed bitterly when she read it. Integrity? That's the word they choose while our daughter sleeps to the sound of gunfire. Andre paced the living room restless. They're trying to freeze us while they fight each other. If we stand still, we lose. His instincts were proven right when Daniel's name reappeared, this time in a leaked memo. Officially, he was listed as AWOL. Unofficially, whispers suggested he was in protective custody. Monica clung to the possibility that he was alive. If Daniel resurfaced, his testimony could fracture the conspiracy. The Collins family's response was totally and louder into the public eye. They attended rallies, gave interviews, and appeared on national television. Monica spoke with clarity, her words slicing through noise. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a system designed to terrorize communities of color. And wave-proof. The crowd roared every time she said it, but the real twist came when an anonymous package arrived at their doorstep. Inside was a thin envelope containing bank statements, emails, and internal memos, all pointing to one aim: a deputy chief within the Austin Police Department who had orchestrated multiple raids and funneled seized assets into private shell companies. The kicker was the signature on an approvaline belonging not to a local officer, but to a federal liaison embedded in DOJ. Monica stared at the papers, stunned. This isn't just Austin. It's federal. They've been running this like a business. Andre's voice hardened, and now we've got the receipts. The Collins family had become the eye of the storm, their names etched into headlines. Their story replayed in living rooms, dire evidence too widely spread to erase. But as the DOJ task force prepared indictments and the FBI traced financial crimes, Monica understood the cost. They had won visibility, not safety. They had forced accountability, but awakened enemies whose reach extended into Washington itself. And as night fell, Andre whispered the truth they both knew but hadn't said aloud. We've exposed them, but we haven't beaten them, not yet. The Collins family's home was repaired, but it never felt whole again. A new door stood where the old one had been shattered. Windows replaced, walls patched. Yet the silence inside carried echoes of boots, offerfuls of a morning that could never be erased. What they did gain was something harder to measure. The raid that was meant to silence them became proof of systemic corruption. The intimidation meant to terrify them only amplified their voices. The planted evidence meant to bury them became the very evidence that exposed the truth. Indictments followed. A handful of officers faced charges, the sergeant included. A deputy chief resigned, federal funds were frozen. For headlines, it looked like justice, but Monica knew better. Justice wasn't a finish line, it was a fight renewed every day. So she kept working. Courtrooms across Texas began hearing cases from families who now felt brave enough to speak. Emboldened by the Collins story, Andre spoke to veteran groups warning about militarizedalists. And Nia, once a terrified 16-year-old, on her kitchen floor, turned her essays into a scholarship path to study civil rights. Their private pain became a public cause. The Collins case grew beyond Austin. It became a symbol, a mirror reflecting America back at itself. For some, it was the courage of a family who refused Tobo. For others, it revealed the fragility of systems that hide behind badges. And for officers still meeting in back rooms, it was a warning. No door stays closed forever. One evening, Monica stood on the porch as the sun dipped low. Her neighborhood calmer now, neighbors nodding with respect that hadn't been there before. Andre joined her, his voice low but certain. We survived. Monica shook her head. No, we changed the story because in America stories matter. Who gets called criminal? Who gets believed? Who carries a badge and who bears its weight? The Collins family forced the nation to confront those questions not as statistics, but as people in their own living room. Months later, when Nia was asked what she remembered most, she didn't talk about guns or shouting. She didn't even mention the planted bag of powder. She said, I remember my mom telling them it was the wrong house. And I remember thinking if this keeps happening, then it's the wrong country. Her voice didn't shake when she said it. And that truth from a teenager who had stare-down rifles was the real ending. The raid started with a shattered door. It ended with a mirror held up to the nation. And once that mirror cracked, everyone had to decide what they saw.